Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Pla.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Pla. At Andrew Pla Tech, we have a very special episode today where Steven Judd is joining us. Very funny guy, Microsoft MVP, PowerShell teacher for a very long time friend as well. Welcome back to the podcast. I don't know, your 20th time on here. Let me click the button to actually get you. There you go. Welcome.
There we go. Now, hey, I'm officially back now. I don't know how many times I've been on because that's not something I keep count on. But I do know some people that are keeping count because they want to see if they can surpass me.
It's competitive out there.
Yeah, I can feel certain members nipping at my heels, and so I was like, well, if you're going to nip at my heels, I'm going to move the bar just a little bit further for you. But I always do enjoy our conversations.
All right, we're going to talk about a lot today. But before we get into and this convo might go a little deep, and I think it might be insightful for a lot of people earlier on in their careers. But before we do that, we met up about a month ago at the time this goes up at Tech Mentor. You gave a workshop with Jason and Sean. Give us one tip that you heard maybe from someone that you gave during your intro to PowerShell, how to become immediately effective, that you think would be relevant to an audio audience.
Oh my goodness. I
didn't prep you for this, right?
No, you did not. You did not. Because there were so many, let's be frank. You were talking about Jason Helmick and Sean Wheeler. These fellows are a absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to PowerShell. And there was, I'm trying to remember, because there was something I was like, I did not know that. It was something Sean was talking about. And you caught me so off guard. I can't remember what it was.
I had a couple light bulb moments. I watched the whole thing. Yeah, maybe at the end we'll circle back. Because some things might come up naturally.
I'll try. I'll try to remember. But I mean, it was one of those things where when it's funny when you go back to the basics and you start reviewing the basics. Well, the basics may sound like, hey, this is the basics for everyone, but it's not necessarily the basics for everyone. So the things that I consider the basics, like, for example, we were talking about, all right, well, what are we going to cover? And I said, we're going to do the tripod. It's what I call it. Get command, get help, get member. Like, if you're not using those three commands, you are messing up in PowerShell, in my opinion, because they're so foundational. And I use those three commands more than any of the other commands, period, end of story. And I believe it was Sean just like, yeah, but we also need get verb. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're taking me from a tripod to a stool, man. And I just don't use get verb as much, although it's very important. So it's an example of what I consider to be the basics didn't necessarily mean that it was the basics. So
why?
Oh, go ahead.
Why is it important though? Like that early on? I think it's more important if you're writing commands. Maybe not, to like discover things, to know what's out there.
Right. That was my argument, right? I think you and I might agree a little bit on that. But the point of that is, like, if you're going to start writing things, and you're going to start writing functions, because that kind of is the progression of PowerShell. Is you start doing commands in the console, and then you start saving those commands, and you save those as scripts, and then you're like, well, these scripts would be better if I could pass parameters into them. And so then it's, well, I'm going to parameterize my script. So now you've got a more functional script, an advanced script, if you will. And then you're like, well, now that I have this thing, it'd be cool if I didn't have to know where it is and know how to run it. So it was in my console anywhere. So then you turn it into a function. Well, then once you start turning it into a function, you're like, okay, well, now I need to name it. This is where the verbs become important, because you should stick with the standards for the verbs. Partly so PS Script Analyzer won't fuss at you. Hey, dude, you're doing something weird in VS Code. But, the other part is so that, you're consistent. And then when you go to functions, then you start turning them into advanced functions. And okay, now I'm going to combine my functions or my advanced functions together, and I'm going to make them much more atomic and smaller, because scripts can be huge and big and do lots of stuff. Well, you want your functions to be small and atomic, so they do the one thing. And then you start combining those together into a module, and then you get really fancy and you create a pipeline for it and you publish it out to the gallery for everyone to enjoy. So that's kind of quick summary of a progression, right? So that's where get verb comes in. You saw where get verb showed up. It's like, hey, I'm into functions now. I need to use the verbs.
Yeah, I could see that. I wonder how long that journey is for people, though, to go from writing your first things to creating the module. because if it's like a 2-year process potentially, which I think isn't too long for some people, because you can be writing maybe some scripts in the meantime and getting some awesome value out of PowerShell. But I don't know, I might be in the wait 6 months. Because there's an interesting thing when you start PowerShell, right? I think if you want to actually use PowerShell regularly and be a PowerShell user, you have to know the tripod, as you call it: get help, get command, get member. But if you want to just slang code from external sources, I mean, you can do that and get some things done potentially in the short term. So I think there's like this trade-off between like hacking one-liners when you're super new and don't even know what PowerShell is, to then realizing like, crap, just slanging these one-liners that I don't understand is not probably the right way. And that's where get help can really clarify how you're supposed to be using these commands, so you don't kind of go down a bad path.
Yeah, it's the slinging commands. There's a point at which you're saying to yourself, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to save this command. Now you've saved it as a PS1 file. Okay, now you got a script. Like there definitely is a progression. How fast people move along, that's their career and their business and their interests. And I'm not here to say here's the way to do it or here's how you should do it, because everyone's on their own personal journey. And that's kind of the topic for what I was hoping we would get to be discussing, is like, how does a PowerShell journey look? How does a career journey look? And how does life journeys look? I'm becoming a little too introspective as the gray starts creeping more and more up my face, as it appears to be doing. But these are the kinds of things that I've been thinking about lately. Is like, how do you get started in something, and what does the journey look like for that?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think you tapped in that real life thing. We're talking PowerShell, it's kind of worky. The truth is we spend so much time at work and we build these relationships. If you're doing this for 20 years, you develop a lot of relationships over a long period of time. And you got to keep in mind that huge journey that can be in front of you. If you're doing something consistently for a very long period of time, you can accomplish really great things. But how did you get started? Were you like a go-getter? Because I see some people who start their careers and they are very hungry. They're going, maybe they have previous education, and I see other people who are more kind of timid for a few years and then they feel comfortable and then they start kind of pushing themselves. Where were you in that?
Yeah, so we're talking about the beginnings of my career. So I graduated college effectively with 2 degrees, and my 2 degrees are in music performance, thus the cello, and also in business administration, because I thought I was going to go into music business. Turns out I wasn't good enough at either one of those to get a job. So I got a job, any job kind of thing, because you need to live. And shortly after, about a year after I got that job, a position opened up on their help desk, and I started doing that. The reason I started doing that is because my last year in college, I bought a computer. And so I had or my next to last year in college, I bought a computer. And so I had a computer. And I was good enough at the classes that involved computers that the professor asked me to teach in the lab. And I was like, yeah, I can work in the lab. And so I helped people in the lab, and I was helping them on programs and classes that I hadn't taken. So I had a natural aptitude for it. And then, you said go getter. It's like, yeah, I was really interested. I read the manuals, back when manuals like actually shipped with product. Nowadays you don't get manuals. Everything's online. So I got started doing that, and I just, I really wanted to excel. I wanted to be good at this thing. And so I studied and I read and I practiced and I tried things. And, when we're talking about journeys, like all pieces of knowledge, we all start at the same way. You all start with, I don't know. And then as you traverse the I don't know timeline, I guess, for lack of a better term, you wind up with I understand. It's not I know, it's I understand, right? Because know is somewhere in the middle. And the journey from one to the other, from I'm going from this point to this point, is an unknown destination. You don't know how long it's going to take you to get from here to there. And you also don't know what pitfalls you're going to have. And I heard someone describe this, and I really wish I knew who this was. It was one of those YouTube videos that I saw. And I would love to attribute them with this idea, because it's not mine, it's theirs, but I don't know who it is. Anyway, they said it's tenaciousness and your ability to withstand uncertainty that gets you from one place to the other, because you don't know how long it's going to take. So, like, if you're going to start your career, you don't know how long it'll be until you get the job you're looking for, or a position that you like, or you find your skills and your interests, and then you find a position that matches up with that. And that valley of despair where you're like, I don't know where I am, I don't know how long this is going to take. The longer you can spend in that and still reach your destination, the more resilient you are as a person. And also, the more satisfying the destination will be.
Absolutely. And I think that valley of despair, you talk about destination, it's where you find the destination. It's where you create that map of what even exists in this industry and what are the different technologies. And there's no way to actually understand all of them, but you can have some awareness and then kind of explore from there. But I totally agree that valley of despair, both in big terms, but also in small terms. Like if you're trying to learn a new technology and you're confused as crap and don't leave this terminal, keep pushing through, because that's where you connect things. That's when you
Exactly.
can make these big jumps. To circle back to what you said earlier, it sounded like you discovered a secret that it took me a little bit longer in my career, and I see some other people not doing it because it's less immediately gratifying, which is RTFM. You actually read the docs of the products that wherever you were interacting with back in the day when they had these big manuals. And there is good docs. Maybe docs have even gotten better in some capacity these days. But a lot of people don't really read it. They'll look for a blog with just the commands they can copy and paste. They don't really
Right.
seek to understand. And then you get into the spot where you're kind of confused and you've committed to something, but you haven't actually learned it. It's just like in math class. You got to build things up. You can't like skip these lessons.
That's so true. That was actually the most challenging thing about getting a music degree is there's no escaping practice. There's just no escaping it. And like if you're really smart at, say, I'll pick on a more science discipline like engineering. So like you're in electrical engineering and you're really smart, and math just comes to you like breathing does. You're going to be able to get through your coursework faster because you're really good at math and it's easy. There's no escaping practice. You have to put in the time because you're working as a unit, and you have to go to the rehearsal time and you have to do that. There's just you have to do it. Well, it's the same thing with reading the manuals. It's like you have to read the manuals. You have to get the knowledge. Now, for some people who read really fast, they have an advantage there. They can consume information faster. Like I'm not a fast reader. I'm more of an editor style reader. I read every letter and every space and every dot. So I find all the mistakes, which is helpful, especially if you're perusing code, but it means I'm slow compared to other people. And so that's just one of those things that like you got to find your place, find your skills, find your knack.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned maybe you're faster, maybe you're slower, and I think we all are going to be on our own journeys at different speeds with different capacities. Some of us has different learning disabilities that might make things longer. But whenever I look at really successful people, what stands out isn't necessarily their built-in intelligence that they were born with, but it's about their resilience a lot of times. Like you'll find people maybe in the business world oftentimes where you're like, wow, that maybe wasn't the most surprisingly intelligent person that I've interacted with. Obviously, it's very hard to judge, but people can do really amazing things. And just humans in general, like if you give enough time and practice, like there's people who can play the piano without hands because they've practiced enough, right? There's all kinds of weird adaptations that humans can do with time under tension, or that kind of concept, like where you're really spending time learning a language or learning a new skill. And
Right.
I think it really is seen in music a lot because you can obviously play really wild things all of a sudden compared to before, maybe a crazy guitar solo, but that is only made possible through a lot of practice and time.
Yeah. You have the same experience in the music. At least I had the same experience where I would plateau. And plateaus are frustrating in the same way that you're in the valley of despair, right? It's like, how long is it going to take me to get to this skill or this next level or whatever it is you're trying to do? The life lessons are the same for both of those, right? And so, you may plateau out for a little while. It's like, oh, my career's not going anywhere. I'm struggling in this. Like, I'll give you a personal example. Certificates are complicated technical pieces of industry, but you kind of need to understand a little bit about certificates in order to survive in this industry. Well, are you going to learn enough to get your job done? Are you going to learn enough to have understanding? Are you going to learn enough to become an expert? And, those are all different journeys. And I didn't want to become an expert in search, but I definitely wanted understanding. And man, did I spend a lot of time in the valley of despair on certificates, because those suckers are hard, but they're hard for a reason, because you don't want to be able to crack them. If it was easy, then people would exploit them, right? And so understanding those concepts and learning that it's just one of those things where I spent enough time in it, but it did not come easy, and it was frustrating. The success, I've heard this said before, is, the successful person is the one who didn't give up before they became successful, right? And so, for the listeners of this podcast, I'm telling you, if you're in the valley of despair, hang in there. Don't just stay there alone either, because this is another thing that you can use is community. You can have friends, you can have contacts and people that can help you get past where you're stuck. And it may, I do like teaching. I do like helping people with stuff. I like to throw my sense of humor into things, as it may be, right? And with my dad jokes and etc. But the point is, I'm trying to get an aha moment for my students, and I'll cover it in different ways so that it helps get the message across. And that's what I mean. Like Sean Wheeler, we mentioned him twice now already. He's really exceptional at teaching and getting concepts across and having different ways to explain things.
You're talking about resilience, the valley of despair. I don't know if it's a secret, but something that's worked really well for me and that I highly recommend to everyone. When we think of this career thing, we're not just learning one technology and we're done. It's a forever thing. So you need to find a way to enjoy the journey, because it's going to be forever, and you deserve to have fun along the way. And like you said, with community, surround yourself with good people. There is the opportunity to join communities and surround yourself with people who maybe are more knowledgeable, less knowledgeable. That part's less important than the support that you get from feeling like you're not alone. And that's going to help you to not quit. For me, whenever I had to decide if I were to choose between someone getting unstuck on a problem or someone feeling like they're not alone in the problem, I think the most helpful thing for them in the long term would to feel like for them to feel like they're not alone in the problem, rather than to actually just solve the problem. And that's where community and friendships come in. And if you do this for long enough, which if you need money to survive, you might be doing this for quite a long time, you can develop these really rich relationships over the years like we have. And it's such a rewarding thing. We're spending so much time at our jobs, and to get something out of it, whether that's helping someone or friendships or good vibes or me being able to help someone, like that makes me feel like my struggle was worth it. And I think we can all relate to that in different capacities.
Yep. I know the kind of the overarching topic for our conversation is beginnings. Do you remember when we met?
Was it at PowerShell Summit, or was it?
It was.
No. Oh, yes, I do. I absolutely remember it now. It was 2019?
2019. That was, by the way, my first summit.
Yeah. My second.
Yep. So,
and you did Nano Conference, right?
I did Nano Conference. That's where you remember me, but we met before that. And I remembered you from this. So I'll tell you my memory of it is we were standing around in the lobby of the Marriott, and you were talking about how because I had kind of I had met and kind of attached myself to someone who was in the on-ramp program. And the on-ramp program is, for those people who don't know, for PowerShell Summit, is a fully paid, if you get the scholarship, like training session with PowerShell people in the community. It's this year it was done by Mike Robbins and myself, and we bring in guest speakers. And we basically take people from, hey, we assume that you know nothing about PowerShell, and by the end you have all the skills and tools you need in order to be effective at PowerShell. And so anyway, I had met this gentleman who was in that program, and you were standing there and you said, oh, I did that last year. And so we got talking about that, and that's where I met you first. And then we went to dinner somewhere. I think it was a Thai restaurant, possibly, because there's a good Thai restaurant near that Marriott. So we wound up there. But that's where I met you. But that's probably not why you remember me.
Oh, I know why I remember you.
All right, your turn. Let's hear it.
So there was this thing, like a one-day conference with a lot of people I looked up to. I wasn't even in the space. I don't remember what it was like CI/CD or configuration management or something like that. And it was earlier at the, like when that was newer. So it was like a lot of great minds, some big companies doing big things. Me, I was at a small company just as a regular sysadmin, not doing any of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I was like a fly on the wall, really learning a lot, learning how people communicate. It was at Microsoft campus. I felt like a boss. This whole PowerShell and going to conference things was still new to me and very exciting. But we're just going through it. I think you gave a quick talk or something. You were at the front of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were newer to the community, so not everybody knew you, but you were making some friends that week. And you said something, and I don't remember what you said, but at the end of it, you said, please clap, which is like a reference to like a Jeb Bush thing where he said something and the crowd didn't respond at all. And then he just said, please clap. And I was probably like 24 or something at the time, maybe 25 or something. And that humor was still so new to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy gets me. Like, how right was I with that retelling? What did I miss?
Yeah, that's how I remember it, because I had in that particular Nano Conf, we had like broken up into small groups and talked about whatever the topic was. And like you, I don't remember it precisely, but we had one of the guys in our group had agreed to explain what we had talked about, and I had gotten up and talked previously about a different topic. And so right when it came time, he was sitting next to me, and he like pokes me and he goes, hey man, I don't think I can do this. Can you get up and talk? And I was like, are you sure it's safe here? He's like, I was like, oh, he's having stage fright. No problem. I'll get up there. I was like, yeah, I got you. So I got back up and was like, said something about, here I am again. You guys remember me from before. You recognize me. And nobody said a thing because I was trying to be snarky. And so when it was just, it's like my jokes, some of them are terrible. They just don't land. It's okay. You got to bomb every once in a while. And so that one bombed, and I went, please clap. And you busted up laughing. I remember that from the audience. You were just like, that is so funny. I don't know why that struck you so funny, but being a Florida man from Jeb Bush land, you're like, that one landed hard.
That was a good joke for sure. And also, I think it was so dry in the room. Like there weren't many jokes going on. So it was like, thank goodness.
No, that was, and like you said, that was before people knew that I'm basically a self-inflicted clown, right? I told people this before about me. I'm like, whatever I say first, don't take that one seriously. Take the next thing I say seriously, because I'm going to try to crack a joke. I'm going to try to make some comment that catches people off guard and that kind of thing. So
I wanted to circle back to something that I think has been a differentiator for you, and I'm wondering if you know it or not. Earlier, you talked about certs, right, as an opportunity to explore something new. I think that when you're talking about things like regex, certs, these things that people know about, they're kind of complicated. They have that barrier to entry. Those are cool opportunities to learn hard stuff. But I think way more importantly, it's a fantastic opportunity to differentiate yourself from your team or from whoever's out there. These are challenging things. It's likely that you're going to be a bit of an asset if you can learn them. So if you're at the stage of your career where you really need to add some value, or who wouldn't want to add a little bit of staying power, or a little bit of negotiation power for finding a new role. But those things I think are fantastic opportunities to really dive deep, and then have something like your regex skills have paid off over time, right? Your understanding of certs has probably really helped in some super clutch situations. Just guessing.
Yeah, it's surprising that of those two, I would say that regex has made a bigger impact on me than the certificates, even though we deal with certificates all the time. And when you're dealing, especially when you're dealing with PowerShell and you're doing the console, things like select string. Select string requires or accepts regex strings in order to do its filtering for what it's going to look for. It's kind of like grep, that's what it's based on, which I forget I think it was like generalized regex processor, I think is what grep stands for. Someone told me once, I was like, that's actually an acronym? I didn't know that. I apologize for those that are now correcting me in the chat, like, hey, that's not what that means. This is what it means. But anyway, knowing regex can differentiate you. It's challenging to learn, but then once you learn it, it's like the Swiss Army knife for processing text. And if you're trying to read logs, or you're trying to write code where you're going to parse the information, that is so important. in PowerShell, the dash replace uses regex. So if you're going to do dash replace, you can do simple stuff. Well, how about get child item? Well, if you're doing get child item and you're listing a bunch of stuff, you're like, oh, that's cool. Here's all my files that I was looking for, but I need to know the ones that the file starts with A, B, or C. Okay, well, how are you going to do that with get child item and pass it in the select object? You're going to say, you're going to use where object because you're going to filter. Like, well, how do I do A, B, or C with like? You really can't. But in regex, it's easy. So having that tool set just really helps you out.
And it's fun. Like all these technologies, they're actually kind of cool if you're into tech, IT stuff in general. Understanding how this stuff works, it's makes me feel powerful because I'm like, oh, nice. This magic that I thought existed is not actually magic. It kind of makes sense. It's built one step after the other. Yeah, and then you can kind of just roll through life with a newfound understanding.
There's a little bit of that, in my opinion, that takes us back to our childhood, where especially if we're in a group and we get to go, watch this. Watch this. Watch what I'm about to do. And I know Jeffrey Snover talks about this. Is like the thing of PowerShell is it's shareable, and so it has a community capability built into it because you can write something that does something amazing, and then you can hand it to someone else, which you cannot do in UIs. There's no watch me click stuff, and people go, ooh, you really know how to use that mouse. Let me tell you what, I have not seen mouse skills like that in many days. Who has ever said that?
Reminds me of those art videos where it's like someone drawing fast forwarded. Just imagine it's like a sysadmin. It's just like clicking next, finish.
I used to call that, well, there are two things I used to call that. One, I called that the next finish installs. Where you don't even read the screens. You're just like, you click next until it turns into finish, and then you click finish. And it's all under the same button. And so you're just click, 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 click. Okay, I'm done. And then what happens next is the blue bar time. And the blue bar time is when that completion bar moves from the left side to the right side. And it's generally blue. If you remember Windows NT or, NT4 days, that bar going across as it's installing a patch. And, back when I was doing consulting type work, I got paid to watch the blue bar go from the left side to the right side.
It's true.
I'm like, well, this is a good use of my time, and the meter's running for the client.
That is a trap you can fall into for sure.
Yeah. So the thing that I did with that is, since the client's paying me to be there, I would go find them in the blue bar time, and I'd say, hey, it's going to take about X number of minutes to go from the left side to the right side. There's nothing I can do. You're paying for me. You have my knowledge at your disposal. Ask me any questions you want about anything, and we can just have a conversation. And so I felt like I was adding more value to them, because then if they wanted to talk about their Wi-Fi or, what their networking issues could be, or, what would an expansion be like, or what's the future? What do I think the future is going to look like? I would just chit chat with them. And then surprisingly, a lot of clients were like, I'm busy. I'll see you later. I'm like, okay, I gave you the opportunity to pick my brain. You chose not to. That's fine. And now you're going to pay me to sit here and watch Blue Bar. It's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And then you moved on and learned PowerShell and automated everything.
That's right. Yeah. Do you remember the first time you were ever exposed to PowerShell?
I think I do. The first time I ever saw it, I believe I do know what it was.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about it. I want to hear.
So wow, this was my first job. I was an IT intern.
Okay.
My whole job was getting paid $10 an hour to upgrade devices from XP to 7. That was my whole thing. And as part of that, it was like an engineering firm, but nobody did IT maybe efficiently. There was no automation anywhere. We had to upgrade some software. We literally got the whole IT team overnight and just walked through all the engineering machines and manually upgraded them. So things weren't great, but I implemented MDT. And as part of MDT, like it ran some PowerShell stuff. And then I clicked on it, was absolutely mind-blown, had no clue what I was looking at. But it slowly put that in my mind. I think eventually I have a couple of YouTube videos, got a book, started chipping away at it. And then several years later, I actually learned it.
There you go. Yeah, for me, it was funny. It was 2008. I remember it clearly. And our company we spent a lot of money with Microsoft. So Microsoft our salesperson, whatever, said, "Hey, we got this new training thing. We would love to come train you on PowerShell." It was PowerShell 1.0. And so
Wow.
it had moved out of Monad. It was out of beta by the time we got it. They actually had some training materials. And so I went to this class a couple days, and it was, PowerShell this, PowerShell that. Here's some commands, do this, do that. Well, the very early bits of PowerShell was very Windows management instrumentation. Do WMI for this, do WMI for that, do WMI for this. And at the time, it was one of those learning journey things is I didn't understand the object model of both Windows and PowerShell, right? So I was a next finish admin, used the UIs, I understood how to do that. I was good at it, but I didn't understand the object model. And so I looked at PowerShell and I was like, why in the world would I give up my years of VB script and all of my VB script examples to run WMI commands, which I can do WMI in VB script? I didn't get it. So I just kind of took PowerShell and I went, whoop, so long, sucker. And what drew me back in was in 2010, I went up to Seattle for the SharePoint 2010 launch, and they had a SharePoint conference in Seattle. Microsoft put it on, and they were like, okay, this thing's in the UI, and here's how you do the rest of it in PowerShell. Okay, if you want to do this, you can go this far in the UI, and then the rest of this is PowerShell. And everything was and PowerShell, and PowerShell, and PowerShell. And I went, uh-oh, I see where this is going. I better learn PowerShell. So in 2010, I was like, well, all right, here's how we're going to do it. I used to do a shortcut on my desktop so that Control-Shift-Z would open the command prompt. And I changed my shortcut from opening command prompt to opening PowerShell. And so then it was like every time I did my shortcut, it took me into PowerShell, and I started learning things in PowerShell. So one of the first things you learn is like percent hostname percent doesn't work in PowerShell because percent means something else, right?
Yep.
So it's like, oh, okay, this is now $env hostname. And then tab completion becomes your friend. And then you start your journey. So, people at the stage I'm at now, yes, I'm the PowerShell MVP. I've been doing this for a while. I mean, I even do my own logos and whatever in PowerShell because I love it so much. But one of my first scripts was doing read host off of a text file that had a list of servers that I was the primary admin responsible for. And then after it read that in, it then piped that into test connection. And based on whether test connection was true or false, I did write host server name is online or server name is offline. And then I realized that wasn't visible enough, so I capitalized all of offline. So this was my script, and I really wish I had a copy of that sucker somewhere. I went looking for it recently. I couldn't find it, but I was like, okay, but that was the start of my journey, right? And this goes back to an axiom that I say, and if you've ever been in anywhere where I've been talking about code, working code is working code. That sucker worked, and it told me exactly. So when someone's like, hey, we're having an issue in the data center, I would whoop out my script and hit enter on it, and it would just tell me, all right, here are the servers that are online or not online. Now, that's a terrible way to do it now that I understand a lot more about PowerShell. Nowadays I would do it completely different, of course. But that's the point, is I was at this point in my journey. Now I'm at this point in my journey.
I think that's a pretty natural project for people to do. And I don't like to discourage them if they're super early on to like use the right host and read host and not output objects, just deal with string. But once you get that fluency and you've done it, then it's a lot easier to learn the proper way and just put it in the PS custom object and put it in there and then ship it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Just small. It's a journey though. And I think there's some people who maybe are listening to this who can relate to being in the next finish, watching blue screen or blue progress bar kind of thing. One thing that I try and do with this podcast is show people that when you learn PowerShell and really learn it and apply it, it changes your career in a really tangible, massive way. And I talk to a ton of people, myself included, you included, who that has been true for, where learning PowerShell has created these opportunities to new jobs, new relationships, new opportunities that are really like what I'm doing now is out of my mind what I thought I could do before I learned PowerShell.
For sure. Yeah, when you just, you glance back at your career and start to look at the markers, one of the markers for me was learning PowerShell, because once I got into it and got excited about it, and it is easier to do the work if you're excited about it, and it's easier to be excited about it if you can see the potential with it, right? So it's when I saw what could be done, and I saw that there really wasn't a ceiling for what could be done. And then I was like, wow, I can learn, I can keep learning on this thing, I can get better. And so one of the things I did at the company I was at the time is we had this, it felt like a 12-step manual process for deploying code to our web servers. And I was the lead web server administrator. And I was like, I think I can do this better. And we wound up using like 3 different tools in order to do the deploy. And one was beyond compare, so it would sync all the files and whatever. We did all this stuff. I'm like, I think I can do this. And so I started working on doing that in PowerShell, and I automated the whole thing to be one command with 3 pieces of, I did 4, with 3 pieces of data, and it would deploy the code. And when it was done deploying, it would send the log to the developer who requested it so that they knew that it was successfully deployed. And one time I had a developer call me up and go, hey, it didn't work. It's missing a file. I'm like, yeah, because the source you gave me didn't have that file. He's like, no, it's in there. And I pulled up the log and I'm like, no, look at the log you got emailed. And he looked and he's like, man, I didn't check that one file in. So, because I had the logs, because I knew where it was, because I used PowerShell to automate the whole thing, I'm like, you can say I made a mistake, but my script doesn't make mistakes. That's the beauty of the automation, is it doesn't make mistakes. It just does what it's supposed to do. Now, are there bugs? Of course, there's always bugs. But, you can be a lot more prescriptive while you're scripting, I guess, is how I would say it.
I have some more questions for you, Steven Judd, after a word from our sponsors.
This is the PowerShell Podcast.
Most of you know the PowerShell Podcast is sponsored and made possible by PDQ. I've had questions from listeners asking, what's PDQ and what do you do? Well, we help IT teams automate endpoint management. PDQ Connect is our cloud-based tool for real-time software deployment, patching, scripting, remote access, and vulnerability management. It's fast, flexible, and built for people who just want things to work. If you want to see it in action, head to pdq.com/podcast and check out our interactive demo. No signups, no emails, no credit card, just a fast and easy way to explore how it works. That's pdq.com/podcast. Automated endpoint management that doesn't slow you down.
Now, back to the PowerShell Podcast.
Steven Judd, when I look at impactful moments in my career, PowerShell was definitely one of them. I am curious to hear, because it sounds like you were going to conferences in 2010. I think that's around when I first was getting into IT for the first time. For me, conferences have been completely perspective changing. I realized that these people who were doing the jobs that I thought I'd never be able to do were just regular like me. What role has conferences played in your career journey?
Ooh, that's a good question. So the funny thing about me is I'm actually an introvert. And so it was actually in 2019, I was at Ignite and I mentioned that in a group of people were just standing around. I'm like, yeah, me being an introvert, some of this stuff is challenging. And one of the guys looked me right in the face. He goes, introvert, you're a liar. He called me a liar to my face. He's like, everyone, you connect, you're constantly talking to people. I can't go anywhere with you that you're not running into people, And I go, yeah, but what you haven't seen is when I go back to the room at the end of the day, I turn into a human puddle because I'm so exhausted from that interaction. So the conferences for me was stepping outside of my comfort zone and doing things that helped me professionally that I wouldn't normally naturally do. And the big one, we keep talking about Summit 2019. That was my first one where I was fortunate enough to go. And that's where I found out that there's PowerShell levels and then there's PowerShell levels. I was pretty good at it by that time. But when I got there, I found people that were actually good at it. And I still know some of those people that are actually good at it. They're like really good. I'm okay. They're really good. I'm not going to name names because then I'll start offending people, right? but we, when you're thinking in your head, you're like, oh, I know who you're talking about. And, and other people will be like, oh yeah, I know who that guy is for me, right? The conferences for me, though, it took me from being on an island at my organization where I was quote unquote the best PowerSheller. There were a couple other guys that were my equal, in my opinion. But I was just spending more time on it, putting the dedicated time into it. Well, then I started getting a community of people, and the community of people were people that were leveled up. And so, that kind of takes me to speech number 2 here, right? Is when we personally are looking for where we're going to go next, we almost always, especially when we're doing comparisons, we look forward and we look up. What we rarely do is look backwards and look back, because there's people coming behind us that have not been on the journey we're on. They haven't spent enough time. They haven't, they're just getting started in their IT career. They don't understand the power of automation or the power of the object model or the cross-platform capability of PowerShell. All these things that it's so good at and so useful for, that makes you a better admin and also makes you a better technologist, not just admin. So, like, would I have ever learned Git without needing to version my PowerShell code? Possibly
Probably
not.
not. Yeah.
Because I'm not a developer. That's not a thing that I do. But now I'm a developer, because other people will say, well, if you're writing code in PowerShell, you're a developer.
If it's running and your company's using it, I mean, what else would you call it?
That's right. So, I've written some things that were relatively key to an organization getting its business done. So yes, I'm a developer. And so once your business is running on it, you better have some tests. You better have versioning. You better be able to roll back if you roll a new thing and it's broken. And the one of the early functions I wrote was a backup for my PowerShell scripts, where it would look at the code, look at the backup, and go, has this changed? And if it has, it would date and timestamp a new version of it. Well, that's great, but now I'm using a file system as version control. Once I learned Git, I was like, this is much better. This will do what I want it to do natively. And so now that it's native, I don't have to know all this stuff. It just does it. It's great.
And it makes you feel like a developer, and you find out, holy crap, there's tons of people who have been using this for a very long time, very widely adopted. Something I try and I've been mentioning it more this year. I don't know if me saying it's getting old yet, but PowerShell is really cool in that it introduces you to a lot of ancillary technologies that, like you're saying, you might never get exposure to. But if you're able to learn a few of these, all of a sudden the category of job that's available to you and the category of maybe technology you can work on kind of changes in a pretty significant way, which I think is so cool about PowerShell. You could start off as someone in help desk and end up as a developer writing SQL, potentially. Like there's a lot of different journeys that we see people go from, but it starts with this understanding of automation and being able to interact with systems that comes from learning an automation framework like PowerShell.
Yeah. And, like you said, you're on a journey, you're on your journey, your blend, your skills, your interests, your imagination will define what you're capable of doing. And, that was a big thing for me. It took me a long time to figure this out, is, have the things that you're good at and be okay with who you are, be all right in your skin. You see me today in a conference, I'm perfectly fine being myself, and I'm wholly and authentically me. But there were definitely periods of time where the imposter syndrome, or the I have to look a certain way, or I have to say certain things, I have to know people or know things in order to be accepted. And that's lies. I hate to say it that way, but it's just not the truth. Like, you be you. It's okay. There will be people who will like you for that, and there'll be other people who will be like, yeah, you're not my cup of tea. Like, I had an example this summer where I told someone one of my dad jokes, and they cringed, and I'm used to that because dad jokes are pretty cringy. But they didn't respond in a, I'm willing to listen to you kind of reaction. And I thought, you know what? That may have made them not uncomfortable, but that wasn't their thing. And so I didn't pursue them with more dad jokes. That's just, I was like, it's okay. You don't like them. I'm not going to press them on you. That's fine.
I think that's a skill that I see a lot of people kind of develop over the years, like the ability to read the room, to see how people are reacting, to know when it's time to continue a rant about your favorite PowerShell module versus it's time to, kind of switch gears and see if the person's even following. And it's cool to see that skill be more prevalent these days than when I started. But on a similar note to you, I remember what stood out the most to me at my first PowerShell Summit was how there were so many people who were comfortable being their authentic selves. Like, it was so cool to me, and it really inspired confidence in me to be like, oh, I don't have to like pretend like I fit in perfectly. Like, I can just be me. And I think that now, fast forward, similar to you, like, what works best for me is being myself. I definitely have gaps. I'm definitely not perfect by any means, but I think that when anyone shows up as their authentic selves, it shines a little bit, and it's attractive to people in a way. They want to hang out with people who are like that. And I love surrounding myself with people who are comfortable being themselves and not changing to conform too much. We all need to get along in a happy, productive way. So a degree of that is required. But other than that, feeling safe to be themselves and be honest,
Right.
ask questions. That's the really important thing where it comes into problem solving. You need to have people feeling safe enough to say, hey, I have no clue what you're talking about. We shouldn't go live with this, right?
Oh, it's happened to me so many times where like it happened. It's funny enough, it happened to me last night at an AI meetup that I was at, and one of the gentlemen there started talking about various machine learning models that can be used for different situations. And he started spouting off, well, if you're doing this, you do this model, and you're doing this, you do this model. And I just went, I have no context for what he's talking about because I don't understand these models. I'm not a machine learning expert by any means. And so it was like, wow, people know so much stuff, and but it doesn't. I want to say that, but then I want to say to people that are new and are listening to this podcast and getting started, this is the superpower that new people have, is they see things through new eyes. And I never say, your input is not valuable. Your input is super valuable. And those of us who are been here a while should be wise enough to listen to you when you say this isn't clear, because it isn't clear if you're saying this isn't clear. And so then it's our job, those of us who've been doing this a while, to go, what are the pieces of foundational knowledge that you need to know, or that the docs need to have, so that this is clear? And that's what I love about it.
Boom. Steven, what a pleasure. This was a really nice chat. I am very impressed by the amount of beginners in PowerShell that I hear coming to me, and I often take for granted a lot of stuff. Like, whenever I discovered what imposter syndrome was, it was a life-changing event. I thought literally I was the only one until I found out there was this thing. And sometimes I don't even define imposter syndrome. I just assume that the audience knows it. But yeah, as we grow, that fresh perspective becomes ever more helpful because we become further detached from understanding that perspective for ourselves.
You thinking you're the only one with imposter syndrome means you had imposter syndrome on imposter syndrome, right?
Right? I didn't even know what it was, man. I was faking it all the way through life.
Well, there's a lot of we fake it till we make it. I mean, that
Absolutely.
is true. And you take our pillars of the community, if you will, and you go talk to them, and they're like, hey, there was this period where I was just completely lost. I had no idea what I was doing. But
Yeah.
they just kept the foot down on the gas pedal, and they kept plowing through. They didn't give up in the valley of despair. And next thing you know, ta-da, here they are.
And that's the consistency thing.
Yep.
Consistency over time. That's how
Yep.
I've been able to cope with the podcast. I'm like, okay, I'm not perfect now. I'm just going to keep doing it. And,
Yep.
sometimes I'll get things wrong and people will be like, oh, wow, even he gets things wrong. Or they'll feel like, oh, I could do a better job. And that would be a great thing. But yeah, we're just being ourselves out here having fun. And we're all in this journey together. So I highly recommend everyone out there find your next step. If you have no community, please join a community. Check out the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. Join us for PowerShell Wednesdays. If you don't like the vibes, join another PowerShell user group. There's so many, but you have to do something. I love it when, I heard from somebody today who's been listening to every single podcast for years, but they only reached out for the first time. So don't be that person. Reach out sooner. You'd be surprised. For me, reaching out, Josh King was super helpful early on. I reached out. He was very friendly. He gave me a sanity check on a blog that I wrote, which gave me the confidence to actually post it. And just yesterday, I gave a little sanity check to somebody who's going to have their first blog post. So shout out to Robin. But
Nice.
We're all in this together. Steven Judd, you've provided a lot of support for me over the years. I think that genuinely, maybe 80% of my strength comes from community and the people who've supported me. Like the 20%, we can all kind of learn tech skills, but the ability to implement it, the ability to practice and get the perspective of others who've actually done it at the highest scale, career changing.
And it's so true that going to Summit in 2019 changed the trajectory of my knowledge and my skills. Unfortunately, 2020 happened the very next year when, I was so hyped and ready to show how I had stepped up my game. And so then I had to do it online. And so now I do a lot more online because that's how the world changed. But you just, you change and you flex with it. And so yes, get in community, find friends. You don't have to be friends with 1,000 people. Just find a few. And, it's especially helpful if you find people that are ahead of you and people that are behind you, and combine that all together into something amazing.
Yep. And there's always going to be people ahead and always people behind, which is a beautiful thing. Steven Judd, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everybody out there for listening. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Join us for PowerShell Wednesdays every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on YouTube live. You can see speakers like Steven Judd, a whole bunch of good stuff. Take care of yourselves out there. Embrace the journey of PowerShell, but don't do it alone. Keep listening to the pod if it's giving you support. But there's also, I can hear your story. You can share yours with the world. You can share those little tips that you've learned, which are incredibly helpful. It's not just people who are writing brand new modules to solve unique issues. Sometimes it's not what you learn, it's what you relearn. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. There's even more people who need to learn it for the first time. But Steven Judd, where can we find you on the internet? People want to tap in. All the links will be in the show notes, but maybe just give them something for the listeners.
Sure. The way to find my content right now is to go to shortcutyour.life. I use the .life domain, and that'll take you to my content page, which I try to keep up. And so it'll have my videos out there. And if you search on YouTube for Steven Judd PowerShell, don't search for just Steven Judd. You won't get me, at least until I become more popular. There's another Steven Judd out there more popular than me. But if you search for that, you'll find my content. And then I'm still on X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm at Steven Judd on that. And final shameless plug is, if you like this hat, you too can have one. And if you like this shirt, there's no place like home, then you too can have this. If you go to store.stevenjudd.com, that'll redirect you to my merch location. And I'm not getting rich off of this stuff. I'm spending a lot of money handing out stickers at conferences, but that's my joy. I love doing it. And, all the proceeds go to buying more stuff to hand out for free.
Awesome, Steven. Well, we'll chat again, as I'm sure we will, or we'll see you at PowerShell Wednesdays, cracking dad jokes in the chat, as always. But till next time, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.